This story is titled, At My Wedding, My Parents Told Everyone That My Golden Brother Deserved All My Success More Than I Did. So I grabbed the microphone and humiliated them in front of all guests, announcing I would never fund them again and let him do it instead. Hey Reddit, my name is Thomas, and I'm 29 years old. I've been working my ass off as a landscaper since I turned 18, starting at the very bottom just mowing lawns in the blistering summer heat. Over the years, I've worked my way up through sheer determination and countless hours of hard work. Now I run multiple crews for a high-end residential landscaping company, making good money with tons of responsibility and actual career growth opportunities. It's something I'm genuinely proud of, even if my parents never saw it that way. You see, my parents have always treated my younger brother Nathan like he was God's gift to humanity. He's 2 years younger than me and has literally never held down a job for more than 6 months in his entire adult life. But somehow, in their eyes, he was always exploring his options and figuring out his path, while I was apparently settling for a blue-collar career that would never amount to anything meaningful. My dad is this old-school plumbing contractor who's been with the same company for over 30 years. My mom works in medical coding at the local hospital. They're solidly middle-class people who live comfortable lives, but they act like absolute royalty when it comes to Nathan. The level of entitlement they showed toward him was completely off the charts, and it had been going on for as long as I could remember. This pattern of favoritism started way earlier than I initially realized, and looking back now, I can see how it shaped everything that came after. When I was 14 years old, I saved up for months working at the local bakery, kneading dough and cleaning up after closing time. I had my eye on this incredible mountain bike that I'd seen at the sporting goods store, and I was determined to earn every penny needed to buy it myself. After weeks of early mornings and aching hands covered in flour, I finally had enough money saved up to make the purchase. I was so proud of that bike when I brought it home. It represented months of hard work and sacrifice, my first real taste of earning something through my own effort. But my dad's reaction when he saw it was immediately dismissive. "Hope you're not planning to get it muddy," he said with this condescending tone. "You paid good money for that thing, so you better take care of it." The very next weekend, Nathan decided to take my bike without asking permission. He crashed it straight into a drainage ditch while showing off for some girl, bending the frame and scratching up the paint job completely. When I absolutely lost my mind about it, screaming about how he'd destroyed something I'd worked so hard for, my dad's response was unbelievable. "It's just a bike, Thomas," he said with this dismissive wave of his hand. "Don't be so materialistic about possessions. Your brother could have been seriously hurt in that accident." Here's the part that really made my blood boil. Nathan got his very first bike as a surprise gift just 2 weeks later, supposedly for improving his attitude after he'd been suspended from school for getting into a fight with another student. My parents literally rewarded him with an expensive gift after he'd been disciplined at school and destroyed my property. I couldn't make sense of the logic then, and I still can't make sense of it now. During my senior year of high school, I actually managed to get accepted to a 4-year college with a partial scholarship. I was genuinely excited about the opportunity and felt like all my hard work in school was finally paying off. However, when I looked at the remaining costs after the scholarship was applied, the numbers were still pretty overwhelming for an 18-year-old. I approached my parents about helping with housing expenses, especially since they'd always talked a big game about investing in education and how important it was for their sons to get ahead in life. My dad's response was to literally laugh in my face. "You've got 2 hands and a strong back," he said with this dismissive chuckle that made my stomach drop. "Figure it out yourself. That's what real men do." So I did exactly what he told me to do. I worked landscaping jobs all summer long, putting in 12-hour days under the scorching sun, saving up every penny I could manage. But when I crunched the numbers realistically, I ultimately decided that community college while working full-time made the most practical financial sense. It wasn't my dream scenario, but it was a smart decision that would let me avoid crushing debt while still getting an education. My parents' reaction to this practical choice was to act like I just announced I was joining some kind of cult. "Community college isn't real college," my mom said, with this heavy sigh, like I'd personally crushed all her dreams and aspirations. I guess not everyone has university potential after all. The disappointment in her voice was unmistakable, and it cut deeper than I expected. Meanwhile, Nathan graduated high school by the absolute skin of his teeth, barely scraping by with the minimum grades needed to get his diploma. His grand plan for the future? Taking what he called a gap year which was really just code for playing video games in our basement and working maybe 15 hours a week at some dead-end job at the mall. But my parents treated this lazy approach like he was embarking on some grand journey of self-discovery. Nathan's really figuring out his path in life. My dad would tell relatives at family gatherings, wearing this proud smile like Nathan was off climbing mountains or volunteering in third world countries. He's not rushing into anything important. He's taking the time to really understand what he wants from life. When I would come home exhausted from pulling 12-hour days between community college classes and full-time landscaping work, Nathan would inevitably be sprawled out on the living room couch. He'd be surrounded by empty snack wrappers and energy drink cans, playing games on the PlayStation that I had actually bought with my own money. Sometimes he'd have some girl over that I'd never seen before, and other times he'd be hanging out with guys who looked shifty as hell and made me uncomfortable just being in the same room. My parents never said a single word about any of it. I clearly remember the time I asked for help with community college tuition. It was only $800 for a semester of landscaping design classes that would actually help advance my career. My dad told me to figure it out because that's what men do when they want something. He made it sound like asking for help was some kind of character flaw or sign of weakness. Meanwhile, they paid for Nathan's entire first year at State University without him even asking. And what did Nathan do with this incredible opportunity that I would have killed for? He flunked out completely after spending the entire year partying nonstop and barely attending classes. Their response to this massive waste of money and opportunity? College isn't for everyone, they said, with understanding nods. Nathan's just too creative for structured learning environments. He needs to find his own way. My buddy Brandon, who I've known since high school, kept pointing out how completely messed up this whole situation was. Dude, your parents act like they owe Nathan everything, and you owe them, he'd tell me whenever we'd grab beers after work. I'd usually brush off his observations with something like, that's just how family dynamics work. But deep down in my gut, I knew he was absolutely right. The double standard was so blatant that even outsiders could see it clearly. Things got exponentially worse when I turned 25. Nathan had borrowed my credit card to buy concert tickets, supposedly just for himself, but actually for him and his entire group of friends. We're talking about $760 worth of premium tickets to some festival. When I confronted him about it at a family dinner, expecting some kind of support from my parents, they acted like I was being completely unreasonable for wanting to be paid back for what was essentially theft. He wanted to treat his friends to a nice experience, my mom said, like that somehow justified him stealing from me. You make good money now, so what's the big deal really? My dad added with this dismissive shrug. It's not like you have a family to support or anything important to spend money on. Nathan just sat there smirking the entire time, clearly enjoying watching me get lectured for being upset about his theft. I'll pay you back when I get my tax return, he said with this casual wave of his hand, like it was no big deal at all. Of course, he never did pay me back, not a single penny. What my parents didn't know, and what made this theft even more infuriating, was that I had been carefully saving that money for a certification program that would bump me up to supervisor level at work. That $760 represented months of careful budgeting and sacrifice, and losing it meant delaying my career advancement by almost 6 months. When I finally did manage to get certified, paying completely out of pocket by picking up extra weekend shifts and working overtime whenever possible, my parents didn't even acknowledge the achievement. They never congratulated me, never asked about the program, never showed any interest in my professional growth whatsoever. Nathan, however, got a congratulations on your new beginning card with $200 cash inside when he managed to get hired as a bartender at some dive bar downtown. He quit that job exactly 3 weeks later because he said the hours were cramping his social life. When I got my first promotion to crew leader at 24 years old, I decided to have a small celebration at this local pizza place that had a nice back room. It wasn't anything fancy, just a chance to mark what felt like a significant milestone in my career. My parents didn't even bother showing up to this modest celebration. It's just landscaping, my dad said when I called to ask where they were. Call us when you get a real career that actually matters. But when Nathan got promoted to head bartender at some dive bar, which basically meant he was the only employee who knew how to make anything more complicated than a beer and a shot, they took him out to an expensive fancy dinner. They even posted all over Facebook about how proud they were of their son's achievement, which was particularly shocking because they weren't even active on social media normally. The difference in treatment was so stark, it was almost comical. My mom would share every single one of Nathan's Instagram posts, no matter how ridiculous or inappropriate they were. I remember one post that she shared with the caption, "My handsome boy enjoying his weekend," was literally just Nathan flexing shirtless in a club bathroom mirror, looking completely wasted. Meanwhile, when I posted photos of a major landscaping project that I had designed and managed for a local business park, complete with elaborate water features and custom stonework that had taken months to plan and execute, there was nothing. No likes, no shares, no comments, complete radio silence from my parents. It was like my professional accomplishments simply didn't exist in their world. For my 27th birthday, my mom sent me a $25 gift card to Chili's in the mail. No card, no note, just the gift card in a plain envelope. It felt like an afterthought, something she'd grabbed at the grocery store checkout line. But for Nathan's 25th birthday, they surprised him with an entire weekend trip to Las Vegas, complete with $500 in spending money for gambling and entertainment. When I pointed out this ridiculous disparity in treatment, my mom's explanation was that Nathan needed a break after his recent breakup. He had been dating that particular girl for exactly 2 months. Speaking of girlfriends, my parents seemed to make it their personal mission to sabotage every relationship I ever tried to build. When I brought home my college girlfriend Tina, who was studying to become a teacher, my mom spent the entire dinner making passive-aggressive comments about how some women just aren't nurturing enough to make good wives. She kept asking Tina pointed questions about whether she planned to keep working after having children, and made it clear that she thought career-focused women were somehow deficient. When I started dating Jessica, who worked as a dental hygienist and was one of the kindest, most genuine people I'd ever met, my dad kept making uncomfortable comments about how she probably just wanted a provider. He actually had the audacity to ask her directly, right to her face at the dinner table, if she was the gold-digging type, who was just looking for a man to support her. Jessica was mortified, and I was furious, but my parents acted like his behavior was completely normal. When I started dating Maya, who turned out to be an absolutely incredible woman, things got even worse. Maya is this smoking hot environmental science teacher who actually respected and understood my work in landscaping. She saw the artistry and skill involved in what I do, and she genuinely appreciated my dedication to my career. For the first time in my life, I was with someone who made me feel valued and supported. The first time I brought Maya to a family dinner, Nathan couldn't handle seeing me with someone so amazing. He spent the entire evening trying to flirt with her right in front of me, telling her that I was still hung up on my ex-girlfriend, which was a complete lie. He kept making comments about how she could do better than a dirt guy and suggesting that she should give him a chance instead. His behavior was absolutely disgusting and completely inappropriate. My parents' reaction to Nathan hitting on my girlfriend right in front of me? They laughed it off like it was some kind of charming joke. "Nathan's always been such a charmer with the ladies," my mom said with this proud smile, while my dad nodded approvingly like his son hitting on his brother's girlfriend was some kind of achievement to be celebrated. Maya was absolutely furious during the car ride home, and I couldn't blame her one bit. "Your brother is a total creep, and your parents just enable every bit of it," she said, her voice shaking with anger. I've never experienced anything like that in my life. I couldn't even argue with her assessment because she was completely right. This pattern continued relentlessly for years and years. Nathan would screw up spectacularly. My parents would rush to bail him out and make excuses for his behavior. I would achieve something meaningful or reach a new milestone, and they would either minimize it completely or ignore it altogether. It was like living in some bizarre parallel universe where the fundamental rules of cause and effect were completely different depending on which son you happened to be. The real breaking point with Nathan came when I had finally saved up enough money for my first newish vehicle. After months and months of working overtime and carefully budgeting every penny, I was able to afford a Toyota Tacoma that was only 3 years old with low mileage. It wasn't anything super fancy or extravagant, but it was a massive step up from the beat-up old cars I'd been driving since high school. I was incredibly proud of that truck because it represented the first time in my adult life that I'd been able to buy something genuinely nice without asking anyone for help or going into debt. I was at my parents' house for one of those obligatory Sunday dinners that I still attended back then, desperately trying to keep some semblance of peace in the family. Nathan showed up already half drunk, reeking of alcohol and clearly in one of his obnoxious moods. I noticed him eyeing my truck through the window and making snide comments about how it was probably compensating for something, and asking if I was trying to impress the ladies with my big truck. After dinner, I stepped outside for a quick smoke break, and when I came back inside, my truck was completely gone. My keys weren't sitting by the front door where I'd left them anymore. I spent the next 2 hours frantically calling and texting Nathan with absolutely no response whatsoever. I was about ready to call the police and report it stolen when this complete asshole finally pulled up with music blasting so loud the neighbors probably called in noise complaints. There were empty energy drink cans rolling around inside the cab, and I could immediately see a huge scratch running down the entire driver's side and a badly dented rear bumper. "Borrowed your ride to pick up Jackie," Nathan slurred as he stumbled out of my truck, throwing my keys at me like I was some kind of valet. She wanted to see if the back seat was as roomy as it looks. Then he just laughed like the whole thing was some hilarious joke and staggered inside like nothing had happened. What my parents didn't see, and what made this violation even more infuriating, was that I had spent the previous weekend meticulously detailing that truck myself. I had washed it, waxed it, and detailed every inch of the interior. I had even gotten down on my hands and knees to scrub the floor mats with a toothbrush. It wasn't because I'm obsessively neat or anything like that, but because that truck represented everything I had worked so hard for. And now, it had a 3-foot scratch gouged down the driver's side and reeked of cheap perfume and stale alcohol. I followed Nathan inside, absolutely fuming with rage, and confronted him in front of my parents about what he had just done. Their reaction was somehow even more infuriating than Nathan's theft itself. My dad looked at the damage, shrugged, and said, "Don't be so dramatic, Thomas. It's just a scratch. These things happen." "Family shares things," my mom chimed in with this sanctimonious tone. "I'm sure Nathan will help pay for the repairs, won't you, Nathan?" Nathan just flopped down on the couch, grabbed the remote control, and changed the channel like nothing had happened. "It's already got scratches on it," he said, without even looking at me. "You're probably just trying to scam me into paying for your own crappy driving. Besides, what's the big deal? It's just a stupid truck. Not like you've got anything better to spend money on anyway." I completely lost it at that point. "He took my truck without permission," I said, my voice rising with each word. "That's theft. He damaged it while driving under the influence. That's a crime. And you're both sitting here defending him like I'm the one who did something wrong." My dad stood up and got right in my face with this aggressive posture I'd seen him use on construction sites. "Don't you dare use that tone of voice in my house," he said through gritted teeth. "Nathan made a mistake, and you need to calm down right now." "A mistake?" I shot back. "He stole my truck. He damaged my property while he was drunk, and you're acting like I'm the problem for being upset about it." That's when my mom started crying, which was her go-to manipulation tactic whenever she was losing an argument. "Why are you always so hard on your brother?" she sobbed. "He's going through a really tough time right now, and you're being so cruel to him." "He's always going through a tough time," I replied, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "And I'm always expected to just deal with whatever he does to me." Nathan, still sprawled on the couch like he owned the place, just smirked at me. "Not my fault you're so uptight, bro. It's just a truck. You need to chill out and stop being such a drama queen." That was the absolute final straw for me. I was completely done with this toxic dynamic. I turned to Nathan, looked him straight in the eye, and said with complete conviction, "You have exactly 30 days to pay for the damages to my truck, or I'm filing a police report for theft and property damage." My dad absolutely exploded at that statement. "You will not file a police report against your brother," he screamed, his face turning bright red with rage. "That is not how this family handles things, and I won't allow it." "Then how does this family handle things, Dad?" I shot back, my voice getting louder with each word. "Because from where I'm standing, Nathan gets away with literal crimes while I get lectured for being upset about being victimized." I walked out of that house and never looked back. That very night, I blocked Nathan's phone number completely. I told my parents in no uncertain terms that I was done with him until he paid for the damages and gave me a genuine apology for what he had done. Their response was exactly what I expected. "You've always been too sensitive about everything. And Nathan's going through a rough patch right now, so you need to be understanding." My mom and dad spent the next several months trying to manipulate me into apologizing to Nathan instead of holding him accountable for his actions. My dad would call me with guilt trips like, "Your mother is really upset about this family rift that you've created." My mom would text me pictures of Nathan at various family events with passive-aggressive captions like, "Someone's missing from our family gathering," or "If only everyone could be here to enjoy this moment." Not once during this entire period did they actually hold Nathan accountable for what he had done. Not once did they acknowledge that he was completely in the wrong. It was always about how I needed to be the bigger person and let it go for the sake of family harmony. They wanted me to just forget about the theft and damage because holding Nathan responsible for his actions was apparently too much to ask. The promotion that changed everything in my life came about 6 months after the truck incident. I had been absolutely busting my ass at work, taking on extra projects, coming in early every single day, and staying late whenever needed. My boss Kevin noticed my dedication and work ethic, and he bumped me up to head manager for all North County projects. The promotion came with a company truck, full benefits package, and a significant salary increase. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like my hard work was actually being recognized and rewarded appropriately. I decided to celebrate this major milestone by throwing a party at this nice brew pub downtown. I reserved the back patio area, ordered food for everyone, and even hired a local musician to play acoustic guitar during the evening. I invited my parents to the celebration, but I made it crystal clear that Nathan was absolutely not welcome at my party. My mom immediately tried to guilt trip me about the decision. "He's still your brother, and family should stick together through good times and bad," she said, with that manipulative tone she always used. My dad was much more direct and confrontational about it. "You need to grow up and get over this childish grudge you're holding," he said dismissively. "It's embarrassing for everyone involved, including you." When I stood firm on my decision and refused to budge, my dad hit me with his final ultimatum. "Fine, but don't expect us to choose sides in this little tantrum of yours." The night of the promotion party, everyone else showed up and had a great time. All my work buddies were there. Friends from my softball league, and even Nathan's wife, Lucy, came without him, which was honestly shocking to me. Maya was there too, looking absolutely amazing and genuinely proud of my achievement. It felt incredible to be surrounded by people who actually valued and respected what I had accomplished. My dad showed up about an hour late, already looking disheveled and wearing this stained Dallas Cowboys jersey, like he couldn't be bothered to change into something appropriate for his son's career milestone. My mom at least made an effort to look happy for me, but she kept checking her phone constantly throughout the entire evening, probably texting Nathan updates about the party. Throughout the night, my dad kept making these loud, passive-aggressive comments designed to make everyone uncomfortable. "Shame not everyone could be here to celebrate," he'd say, within earshot of my coworkers. "Some people think landscaping management is a big deal, I guess," he'd mutter whenever someone would congratulate me on the promotion. Every single time Kevin or one of my other coworkers would say something positive about my work or my promotion, my dad would immediately jump in with some comment about how Nathan could have been a landscape architect if he had really wanted to pursue it. "He just has bigger ambitions than this kind of work," he'd say with this dismissive wave of his hand. At one point during the evening, Kevin was showing everyone the before and after photos of that tech CEO's project on his tablet. You could literally see my design skills and artistic vision in the transformation of this completely barren hillside into this gorgeous terraced garden with native plants and a small waterfall feature. It was some of my best work, and I was genuinely proud of how it had turned out. My dad glanced at the photos for maybe 2 seconds before saying loudly, "Looks like a bunch of plants to me. Not exactly rocket science, is it?" His dismissive attitude was so obvious and embarrassing that several people actually stopped their conversations to stare at him. My co-worker Damon, who had absolutely no idea about my family dynamic or history, pulled me aside later in the evening and asked quietly, "Dude, what's up with your dad? Why is he being such a complete jerk at your own promotion party?" I just shrugged it off and told him not to worry about it, but inside I was absolutely fuming with embarrassment and anger. Then Kevin stood up to make this really thoughtful toast about how I had earned the promotion through consistent hard work, reliability, and exceptional client management skills. He mentioned how clients specifically requested me for their projects and how lucky the company was to have someone of my caliber on the team. It was exactly the kind of recognition I'd been working toward for years. That's when my dad decided to stand up right in the middle of Kevin's toast, interrupting him mid-sentence, and announced to the entire patio full of people, "Must be nice getting promotions for just showing up and pushing a lawnmower around. Not like you're out there building actual structures like real men do. Your brother would have run circles around this landscaping stuff if he had wanted to waste his time on it, but he's always aimed higher than this. Shame you couldn't even invite your own blood to your little party. Some son you turned out to be." The entire place went completely dead silent. Kevin's jaw literally dropped open in shock. Maya squeezed my hand so hard it actually hurt, and something inside me just completely snapped, but not by yelling or losing my temper. Instead, I felt this strange calm come over me. like I was finally seeing everything clearly for the first time. I raised my glass with this completely calm smile and said, "That's awesome, Dad. Then Nathan can start paying your mortgage too when his bartending shifts aren't keeping him busy stealing cars. Or maybe he can sell some of those actual structures you think are so impressive." My dad's face turned bright purple with rage. "How dare you talk to me like that after everything we've done for you over the years?" he sputtered. I actually laughed right in his face. "Everything you've done for me? Name one thing, Dad. Just one actual thing you've done for me that you didn't make me pay back with interest or hold over my head forever." My mom tried to jump in with her usual peacemaking routine. "Thomas, please, not here in front of everyone. We're still your parents." "No," I cut her off completely. "You're Nathan's parents. I'm just the ATM you use when he burns through his monthly allowance." I set down my glass, thanked everyone else for coming to celebrate with me, and walked out of my own party. Maya followed me to the parking lot, but I told her I needed some space to process everything that had just happened. I got in my truck and drove to this scenic overlook outside of town, where I sat for hours thinking about all the years of mistreatment and manipulation I had endured. What made the whole situation even worse was the realization that I wasn't even angry anymore. I was just completely done with all of it. It was like someone had flipped a switch inside my brain, and all my feelings about my family had just disappeared into this strange, peaceful emptiness. I felt like I was finally seeing the situation clearly for the first time in my adult life. That night, sitting alone at the overlook, I made the decision that I was completely done being the family punching bag. I was tired of being treated like I didn't matter while Nathan got away with literal crimes. I was exhausted from years of having my achievements minimized while his failures were excused and enabled. I called my buddy Brandon, who works at the bank where my parents have their accounts. It wasn't exactly legal what I was asking him to do, but he owed me big time after I had covered for him when he got into some serious trouble a few years back. "Hey, I need you to check something for me," I told him over the phone. "I want to know exactly how much my parents are helping Nathan financially. I need to see the real numbers." What Brandon discovered the next day was way worse than I had ever expected. My parents weren't just helping Nathan out occasionally with small loans or emergency funds. They were completely financially ruined by him, and they had been hiding the full extent of it for years. Brandon texted me the details, and I couldn't believe what I was reading. "Dude, it's way worse than you think," his message said. "They've been paying his entire rent every single month. That's $1,850. His car payment is another $430 monthly. They're covering his credit card minimum payments, which run about $600 every month. And get this, they're co-signers on a personal loan he took out 3 months ago for $25,000, and they're making the minimum payments on that too. Their bank accounts are getting completely drained every single month." That information was all I needed to hear. I still had access to my parents' email account from when I had set up their computer a few years earlier, so I logged in to get a fuller picture of their financial situation. What I found was even more disturbing than Brandon's banking information had revealed. I discovered that they had been struggling with their own finances for months. My dad's construction company was downsizing due to the economic climate, and he was genuinely worried about getting laid off. They were actually behind on their own mortgage payments because they were prioritizing Nathan's expenses over their own basic needs. I also found emails from multiple credit card companies showing that they had maxed out 3 different cards paying for Nathan's various emergencies. One charge was for $3,000 at some fancy hotel, where Nathan had apparently thrown an elaborate birthday party for himself and his friends. Another was for $1,800 at an electronics store where he had bought himself a complete gaming setup with multiple monitors and high-end equipment. All of this excessive spending was happening while my parents were literally skipping their own mortgage payments to keep Nathan afloat. So I decided to make my move, the ultimate clean break from this toxic family dynamic. I spent the next week completely ghosting their phone calls while I methodically set everything up for my disappearance. I found a new apartment about an hour away in a complex with excellent security features and gave notice at my old place. I explained the family situation to Kevin at work so he would understand why I needed to keep my new address completely private and confidential. But before I completely disappeared from their lives, I decided to make a few strategic moves that would give them a taste of the consequences they had been avoiding for years. I forwarded those credit card emails directly to both of my parents with a simple message attached. "Hope the golden child was worth bankrupting yourselves." Then I sent an anonymous tip to my dad's construction company about how he had been taking materials from job sites for personal projects around the house. This wasn't something I made up or exaggerated. It was actual behavior he had bragged about for years at family dinners, showing off how he could beat the system and get free supplies. It wasn't enough to get him fired outright, but it was definitely enough to make sure he would be on the very first list when the company started making layoffs. Was it petty? Maybe. But after 29 years of watching him break rules while holding me to impossible standards, it felt like pure karma. After that, I changed my phone number completely, deleted all my social media accounts, got a P.O. box for all my mail, and essentially vanished from their lives without any warning or explanation. The first month of complete radio silence from my family was honestly pretty weird. I kept expecting to feel guilty about cutting them off so abruptly, or to cave and call them to try to work things out. But that feeling of regret never actually came. Instead, I felt this huge weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying around. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't constantly bracing myself for the next family drama, the next unfavorable comparison to Nathan, or the next request for help that would be taken completely for granted. I threw myself completely into my work with a renewed focus and energy that surprised even me. Kevin was genuinely impressed with my dedication and results, and within just 3 months, I was exceeding all my performance targets by significant margins. The company was so pleased with my work that they gave me a substantial bonus, which was incredible because, for the first time in years, I actually got to keep the money instead of lending it to Nathan or helping my parents with some manufactured emergency. My new apartment was smaller than my previous place, but it was in a much better neighborhood with actual amenities and security. I furnished it exactly how I wanted it, with no secondhand furniture, no hand-me-downs, and no compromises. Everything I picked out was chosen by me, for me, and it felt like a genuine fresh start in every possible way. The very first thing I bought for the new place was this incredible leather couch that I had been admiring for years, but could never justify spending the money on. Every time I had saved up enough to afford it, Nathan would inevitably need another loan, or my parents would have some crisis that required my financial assistance. Now I could finally buy something nice for myself without feeling guilty about it. I set up a proper home office with a real desk instead of the folding table I had been using for years. I hung art on the walls that I actually liked and enjoyed looking at, instead of the garage sale prints my mom had always given me to make the place look more homey. Every single thing in that apartment was there because I chose it and wanted it there. Maya and I decided to take a break from our relationship for a while. She was completely supportive of my decision to cut off my family, but she needed some time to process the fact that I had essentially erased my entire family from my life in one dramatic move. I thought that was totally fair, and we stayed in touch through coffee dates every couple of weeks and regular texting. She was dealing with her own family issues, so she understood the complexity of toxic family dynamics better than most people would. I started making new friends through work connections and joined an adult soccer league that played games on weekends. I began hiking regularly in the mountains outside the city, and I actually developed real hobbies that weren't just ways to escape from family stress and drama. For the first time in my adult life, I was putting myself first and prioritizing my own well-being, and it felt absolutely incredible. I also started a small side business designing landscapes for homeowners who couldn't afford full professional landscaping services. I created template plans that they could implement themselves, complete with detailed plant lists and maintenance schedules. This side business brought in an extra $1,500 to $2,000 per month, doing work that I genuinely loved without any family drama attached to it. I was finally building something that was entirely mine. 8 months after I had completely disappeared from their lives, Maya, who I was still keeping in touch with regularly, told me that my dad had indeed been laid off during his company's restructuring process. My mom's hours at the hospital had been significantly cut back due to budget constraints, and Nathan was still doing exactly the same irresponsible stuff he'd always done. He was still the golden child who could do absolutely no wrong in their eyes, except now they couldn't afford to keep bankrolling his destructive lifestyle. Maya had run into Lucy at the gym, and Lucy had apparently spilled all the details about what was happening with my family. Nathan had been fired from 3 more jobs in the span of just 6 months. The most recent firing was from a warehouse job where he had been caught stealing inventory and selling it online for extra cash. Instead of pressing criminal charges against him, the manager had just fired him because he didn't want to deal with the paperwork hassle of prosecuting the case. Nathan had also managed to total the Honda that my parents had bought for him. and he was now driving my mom's car everywhere, which left her taking public transportation to work every day. My dad had been forced to sell his prized fishing boat to cover some of Nathan's outstanding debts, but he was telling everyone that it was just time for an upgrade to save face. The most satisfying part of this whole situation was learning that Nathan had been forced to move back in with my parents because he couldn't afford rent anywhere on his own. So now there were 3 adults crammed into their small 2-bedroom house, with Nathan taking over the entire living room with his belongings. According to Lucy, the place looked like a college frat house, with Nathan's stuff scattered everywhere, and my dad just sitting in the kitchen, looking completely shell-shocked at what his life had become. Then the text messages started coming from unknown phone numbers, which I quickly realized were extended family members trying to reach me after getting my new contact information from somewhere. "Your parents are really struggling right now," they would say. "They might actually lose their house if things don't turn around soon." My Aunt Linda even left me a voicemail saying, "I know they weren't always fair to you growing up, Thomas, but they're still your parents at the end of the day." I said absolutely nothing in response to any of these attempts to reach me. I did nothing to help or intervene in their situation. I just kept living my life, running my landscaping crews, making good money, and actually enjoying the peace and stability that came with having zero family drama in my daily routine. My cousin Tim, who I had always been relatively close with during family gatherings, was smart enough to reach out through my work email address. "Hey man, I totally get why you went dark on everyone," his message said. "I've seen how they treated you compared to Nathan over the years, and it was pretty messed up. But things are really bad for them now. They're drowning in debt from all those years of constantly bailing Nathan out of trouble. Just thought you should know what's going on." I didn't even bother replying to Tim's email, not because I was angry with him personally, but because I knew that any response would open a door that I absolutely wasn't ready to open. Any communication would be seen as a crack in my resolve, and they would immediately start pushing to widen that crack until I was sucked back into their toxic dynamic. Around the 1-year mark of my complete disappearance from their lives, I got an unexpected visitor at my work site. It was Lucy, Nathan's wife, or actually his ex-wife, as I would soon find out. She looked tired and worn down, with bags under her eyes, but she was dressed professionally and seemed to have her life together. "I was in the area for a job interview," she explained when I looked surprised to see her. "I thought I'd stop by and see how you were doing." We went to get coffee at a nearby cafe, and she filled me in on the current family situation without me having to ask for details. She and Nathan had officially split up about 6 months earlier, after she discovered that he had been cheating on her with multiple women throughout their marriage. She had moved out, gotten her own apartment, and was in the process of completely starting her life over from scratch. "Your parents are in really bad shape," she told me, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "The bank actually foreclosed on their house about 2 months ago. They're living in this tiny 1-bedroom apartment now that's barely big enough for 2 people, let alone 3. Your dad's been completely blacklisted in the construction industry after that anonymous tip about him stealing materials, so he can't find work anywhere. Your mom's hours got cut back to part-time, so their income is basically nothing now. They're completely broke." "And what about Nathan?" I asked, surprised at how little emotion I felt when hearing about their financial collapse. "Nathan is still Nathan," she said with this dry, bitter laugh. "Still partying whenever he can scrape together money, still charming his way through life without any real consequences. He's living on their couch in this cramped apartment, and he's still somehow their perfect son, even as they lose everything trying to help him." Lucy told me that Nathan had actually been offered a management position at his friend's landscaping company. It was a much smaller operation than where I worked, but it would have been steady income with real responsibility and growth potential. But Nathan had turned down the job because, in his words, "That's Thomas's thing, and I'm way better than that kind of work." Instead, he claimed to be working on a startup idea that seemed to involve playing video games for 12 hours a day and doing very little actual productive work. Lucy didn't ask me to reach out to my parents or try to guilt me into helping them. She didn't try to manipulate me or make me feel responsible for their situation. She just shared the information objectively and let me decide what to do with it. "I honestly don't blame you for leaving the way you did," she said as we were getting ready to part ways. "I wish I had been smart enough to get out of that toxic situation much sooner than I did." A year and 3 months after I had completely disappeared from their lives, there was a knock at my door on a Sunday morning. I checked the security camera that I had installed specifically for situations like this, and I could see Nathan standing outside looking absolutely terrible. He was unshaven with dark bags under his eyes, wearing cheap clothes that hung off him like he had lost a significant amount of weight. I seriously considered not answering the door at all, but my curiosity got the better of me. "How did you find me?" I asked through the barely cracked open door, definitely not inviting him inside my apartment. "Maya told Mom where you work now," he admitted, which immediately made me angry at the breach of trust. "It took me 3 weeks of watching the parking lot after work to follow you home." The fact that he had essentially stalked me was both pathetic and genuinely creepy. "Can I come in?" he asked hopefully. I stood firmly in the doorway, completely blocking the entrance to my apartment. "Why would I let you in after you literally stalked me to find out where I live? Mom and Dad lost the house," Nathan blurted out desperately. "The bank foreclosed on it last month. They're living in this crappy one-bedroom apartment now that's barely big enough for both of them. Dad can't find any work because of that anonymous tip someone sent to his company about the materials he was taking. Mom's hours got cut back even more at the hospital. They've been helping me out financially for years, but now they can't afford to do it anymore." "And?" I said, feeling absolutely nothing but mild annoyance at being bothered. "And I'm completely screwed, man," Nathan continued, his voice taking on this desperate, whining quality. "I've got something like $40,000 in total debt spread across different credit cards and loans. My car got repossessed 2 weeks ago. Lucy left me and filed for divorce. I've been sleeping on their couch, but there's barely enough room for them in that tiny place, let alone me taking up their living room." As Nathan talked, I started noticing things that I hadn't seen at first glance. His hands were shaking slightly, and his eyes couldn't seem to focus on one spot for more than a few seconds. He had this weird, jittery, nervous energy that reminded me of people I'd seen who hadn't slept properly in days. These were classic signs of substance abuse that I'd witnessed plenty of times in my line of work. "I'm still waiting for the part where any of this becomes my problem," I said with complete indifference. Nathan's face immediately got red with frustration and anger. "Look, I know I messed up in the past, okay? I'll admit that. I was jealous of you because you always had your stuff together and I didn't know what I was doing with my life. But they're going to end up homeless soon if they keep trying to help me out. They're your parents too, man." The confession of jealousy caught me completely off guard, but it wasn't nearly enough to make up for years of theft, manipulation, and enabling from my parents. I stepped outside my apartment, closing and locking the door firmly behind me, and got right up in Nathan's face so he could see how serious I was. "No, they're your parents," I said, with ice-cold clarity. "They made that crystal clear for 29 years of my life. I'm just the gardener who wasn't good enough, remember? I'm the ATM they used when their precious golden child burned through his monthly allowance." "They talk about you all the time now," Nathan said, his voice actually cracking with what sounded like genuine emotion. "Dad says he was wrong about everything. Mom cries constantly about how she should have stood up for you more over the years. How amazing that they only realized that when the gravy train finally stopped running," I replied with bitter sarcasm. "Tell them I said congratulations on the sudden self-awareness. Better late than never, right? So you really won't help them at all? After all those years they supported you growing up?" Nathan's voice had that familiar entitled edge creeping back into it, which reminded me exactly why I had cut them off in the first place. I actually laughed right in his face. "Supported me? When exactly was that, Nathan? When they made me pay back every single cent I ever borrowed with interest? When they showed up at my promotion party just to publicly trash my career in front of my coworkers? When they defended you for stealing and damaging my truck? They need $15,000 to avoid getting evicted from the new apartment and to get caught up on their bills," Nathan said, clearly hoping I would cave and write them a check. As he was talking, I noticed a fresh tattoo peeking out from under his sleeve that looked professionally done and expensive. His shoes were cheaper than usual, but he was still wearing the same $400 watch he'd always had. It was typical Nathan behavior, still finding money for the things he wanted while begging other people to pay for the things he needed. "Get off my property before I call the police," I said with complete calm. "And don't ever come back here again." As Nathan walked away with his shoulders slumped in defeat, part of me wondered if I should feel something. Pity, satisfaction, anger, anything at all. But there was just this peaceful emptiness inside me, like I had finally set down a tremendously heavy weight that I had been carrying around my entire adult life. 2 weeks after Nathan's pathetic visit to my apartment, I received an email at my work address from my mom with the subject line, "We're sorry." The timing wasn't coincidental. They had clearly sent Nathan to test the waters, and when that failed miserably, they decided to try a different approach. The email was incredibly long. stretching on for pages and pages of explanations about how they had finally realized too late how unfairly they had treated me throughout my life. They wrote about how watching Nathan spiral completely out of control without their financial support had somehow opened their eyes to the fact that they had been enabling his destructive behavior for years. They mentioned that my dad had been diagnosed with clinical depression after losing his job and watching their family fall apart, and how they were facing eviction from their tiny apartment with absolutely nowhere else to go. The email was filled with what seemed like convenient new realizations about their past behavior. They claimed they had always secretly admired my incredible work ethic, but somehow didn't know how to properly show their appreciation. They wrote about being blinded by Nathan's superficial charm and charisma, and how they now understood that their completely different parenting styles had actually been harmful double standards that damaged both of their sons. There were lines scattered throughout the email that might have moved me emotionally at one point in my life. We realize now that we took your natural strength and reliability for granted while we coddled Nathan's obvious weaknesses. One section read, "Your father can't sleep at night thinking about how he dismissed and belittled your career when you've created such a successful and meaningful life for yourself." At the very end of this lengthy emotional manipulation, there was the direct financial ask that I had been expecting from the beginning. "We desperately need $15,000 to keep our apartment and get back on our feet financially," the email stated. "We know we have absolutely no right to ask this of you after everything that's happened, but we literally have nowhere else to turn for help. Nathan told us about your new place and how well you're doing now. Please, Thomas, we're still your parents and we love you." Here's the thing that made this whole situation even more frustrating. I actually was doing very well financially at this point. The promotion had nearly doubled my annual salary. I had built up a solid emergency fund, and my investments were starting to grow steadily. I absolutely could have written them a check for $15,000 without it significantly hurting my financial position or lifestyle. But I remembered with crystal clarity all those years of being treated like I didn't matter as a person. I remembered watching them bail Nathan out over and over again while I struggled completely on my own with no support. I remembered the look of disgust on my dad's face at my promotion party when he talked about my career like it was something shameful. I remembered every single time they had made me feel worthless and unimportant. So instead of responding emotionally, I decided to handle this situation exactly like the business transaction they had turned our family relationship into. I sent them a formal letter through my lawyer's office outlining my terms. "I am prepared to provide financial assistance under the following non-negotiable conditions," the letter began. "First, I will pay $15,000 directly to your landlord and creditors, not to you personally. Second, you will both sign a formal loan agreement with 8% annual interest, which are the exact same terms Dad gave me for my truck repair loan, with payments to begin in 6 months. Third, Nathan will check himself into a 90-day rehabilitation program for his obvious substance abuse issues, with proof of successful completion required. Fourth, you will both attend a minimum of 6 sessions of professional financial counseling, with proof of completion required. Fifth, you will sign a legal agreement stating that you will not contact me outside of loan repayment matters for a period of no less than 2 years. These terms are final and completely non-negotiable." My mom called my lawyer's office crying hysterically, begging him to convince me to just help family without all these cold, heartless conditions. She kept saying that families should help each other unconditionally, without contracts and legal paperwork. My dad left an angry voicemail on the law office phone saying, "Real men don't treat their own parents like business clients. This is disgusting and shameful behavior." I didn't respond to either of their emotional outbursts. I just waited patiently to see what they would ultimately decide to do when faced with the reality of their situation. 3 days before they were scheduled to be evicted from their apartment, I received an email from my lawyer confirming that they had signed every single condition in the contract. Nathan had checked himself into a 90-day rehabilitation program, and the first payments to their landlord and various creditors had already been processed and completed. My life now is completely unrecognizable from what it was just 2 years ago. Maya and I are officially engaged after working through our relationship issues and building something genuinely healthy together. I received another significant promotion at work, and I'm now overseeing landscaping operations for the entire county, which comes with substantial responsibility and an excellent salary. We bought our first house together. Nothing extravagant or showy, but it's genuinely ours and we love every square foot of it. We also have a dog named Rex, who absolutely loves riding in my truck, which I still own and take meticulous care of as a symbol of everything I've worked to achieve. Sometimes when Maya and I are driving to visit her family, who are absolutely amazing people by the way, we pass through the part of town where my parents now live. Her dad actually asks me detailed questions about my work and seems genuinely interested in my projects and career growth, which is something I never experienced growing up. Occasionally during these drives, I'll see people in the distance who look like my parents from far away, but I feel absolutely nothing when this happens. No anger anymore, no lingering resentment, not even satisfaction at how everything ultimately turned out. Just complete emotional emptiness. After spending my entire childhood and early adulthood being made to feel like nothing by the people who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally, that peaceful emptiness actually feels like the biggest victory of my entire life. I've built a successful career, a loving relationship, and a stable life completely on my own terms, without any of their manipulation, guilt trips, or toxic family dynamics. The loan payments from my parents arrive promptly every month, processed automatically through the bank just like any other business transaction. I never hear from them directly, which is exactly how I wanted. Nathan completed his rehabilitation program, though I have no idea whether he's actually sober or just going through the motions to fulfill the contract requirements. Honestly, I don't particularly care either way because his choices and consequences are no longer my problem to worry about. I've learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to completely walk away from people who consistently treat you badly, even when those people happen to be your biological family. I spent 29 years trying to earn their approval and recognition, and I wasted so much emotional energy hoping they would eventually see my worth and treat me fairly. The moment I stopped caring about their opinion of me and started prioritizing my own well-being was the moment my real life actually began. I have genuine friends who respect and value me, a career I'm passionate about, a woman who loves and supports me, and a future that I'm building exactly how I want it to be. For anyone reading this who might be dealing with similar family dynamics, I want you to know that you don't owe toxic people access to your life just because you share DNA with them. Sometimes the healthiest choice is to save yourself and let them figure out their own problems. You deserve to be treated with basic respect and consideration, and if your family can't provide that, it's perfectly acceptable to find people who can. I sleep peacefully every night knowing that I finally put myself first, and I've never once regretted that decision. TLDR. Parents favored my irresponsible brother his entire life while treating me like garbage despite my success. After years of theft, manipulation, and public humiliation, I cut them off completely. When they faced financial ruin from enabling my brother, I helped them only under strict legal conditions that treated our relationship like the business transaction they had made it. Now I'm engaged, successful, and happier than I've ever been. What do you think? Have any of you dealt with similar family favoritism? How did you handle it?